It sure looked like heading into 2014 that the Carolina Panthers were in for a very long, very tough season. What might end up being even classified as a lost season. You know, they lost a lot of key players off of that divisional championship team from 2013. You thought maybe teams like New Orleans, Atlanta, and or Tampa Bay were going to be improved in that NFC South, and that with the lack of weapons surrounding Cam Newton on offense and some of the losses on defense, that this Panthers team would bring up the rear in that division. And I was on board with that, and that's what I thought too. A lot of people thought this team was in for a huge regression in 2014 and was a threat legitimately to finish last in the division. And to be fair, to be honest, through the first 3 quarters of the season, that's exactly who the Carolina Panthers looked like. I mean, outside of the Bucs, obviously, the Panthers looked like, you know, a team that was resigned to their fate. They looked like a team that was destined to bring up the rear in that division. They looked like they were done. They were cooked. I mean, you're talking about starting off a season 3-8-1. I mean, by the good graces of playing in one of the worst divisions I've ever seen, which was the 2014 version of the NFC South, were the Carolina Panthers even able to be in any type of playoff contention in a very strong NFC. That's the only way. I mean, they started off 3-8-1. They headed into December behind the Saints, behind the Falcons, and looking like they had no hope and looking like a team, frankly, that might not win another game. However, they managed to turn it around. They managed to save their season. As a matter of fact, they made their season and actually built themselves up some momentum heading into 2015. They took what could have been, and for all rights, intents, and purposes, should have been a very negative season and perhaps spun it into a nice positive, if not a very big positive, heading into 2015. To be fair to the Carolina Panthers, part of the reason why I envisioned them struggling this year so mightily and thought they were going to win 4, maybe 5 football games was the fact that their schedule was going to be brutal. They played Detroit and Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Cincinnati and Green Bay and Seattle and Philadelphia. That's a tough schedule, a very tough schedule. And when you look at all of those games, you know, it's not hard to see why after 12 games this team was 3-8-1. I mean, they had one of the toughest schedules in the National Football League in terms of how to division play. You know, they really, really did. So as a result, it was going to be a big challenge for them to get back to the playoffs to win their division. But again, because of the circumstances, situation that they found themselves in, even at 3-8-1, they were still in the mix. And fortunately for the Carolina Panthers, the last 4 games of the season, they got to play each of the teams in the NFC South, and he sprinkled in Cleveland in there. They got a nice kind of soft schedule finish, and they exploited it and took full advantage of it. They got hot at the right time. They established Jonathan Stewart in the ground game, and their defense went to a different level, and they ended up going 4-0 to close out the season. They went 7-8-1, end up winning the NFC South, and then on top of that, they go into the playoffs, beat Arizona, and advance to the divisional round where they put up a nice fight against the now back-to-back NFC champion Seattle Seahawks. A season that had so much potential for so much disaster turned into a big positive. And now you can sit there and say, well, they won the NFC South. Whoop-de-doo. It's a fair point. You could sit there and say they beat Ryan Lindley and the slumping Arizona Cardinals in the wild card round of the playoffs. And again, you've got a really good point. But for a team that was anticipated by many to win somewhere between 3 to 5 games in 2014, and that this was going to be a lost season, and the fact that nobody in the history of the NFC South has ever won that division back-to-back years, the Carolina Panthers were able to go from 3-8-1, playing that brutal schedule their first 12 games of the year, to winning their last 4 games in the regular season, winning that division, and being able to win a home playoff game, and building some real momentum and growing as a team and as an organization heading into 2015 and beyond. You can sit there and say, yeah, they beat the Arizona Cardinals. They still beat somebody in the playoffs. The Cardinals got to the playoffs for a reason. They deserve to be there. Lindley or not, it doesn't matter. And the Panthers beat them, and they owned them. And that means something. Now, even though this was a team that was middle of the pack in many ways, offensively, defensively, even though they got hot at the right time against the weaker part of their schedule the last 4 weeks of the year and then again against Arizona, while they were middle of the pack, that's still a lot better than a lot of us anticipated. And that has to be classified as a huge victory in a way for the Carolina Panthers for 2014. And part of the reason, again, why we anticipated, so many of us, that the Panthers were going to struggle was because you look at what they had lost. They lost Cam Newton's top 3 wide receivers from 2013. Gone was Steve Smith to the Baltimore Ravens. Gone was Brandon LaFell to the freaking New England Patriots. Gone was Ted Ginn Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals, I believe it was, wasn't it? It doesn't matter. But his top 3 options in the passing game were all gone on the outside. You lose Travell Wharton, you lose Jordan Gross to retirement, you lose Greg Hardy to his off-the-field stupidity. Some of your biggest key, marquee players that were crucial to your success in a lot of ways in 2013 were now going to be out of the picture in 2014. And in a lot of ways, you didn't have time to effectively replace them. So, again, there were reasons to expect that the Panthers were going to regress and regress mightily, and in some ways they did. I mean, you're talking about a team that went from winning double-digit games and getting a first-round bye last year to a team that was 7-8-1. I mean, let's call it as we see it. But part of the reason that Panther fans should be really excited about this team's future, especially heading into 2015, where they will have to be prohibitive favorites to win this division for the 3rd straight year, is the strength of this 2014 draft class that they have. Kelvin Benjamin in round 1, Coney Ely in round 2, Trey Turner in round 3, Trey Boston in round 4, Ben Wakiri in round 5, an undrafted player like Philly Brown, for Christ's sakes, out of Ohio State. They got a lot of contributions out of this draft class for a team that has been plagued over the years by the lack of production throughout the whole entirety of a draft class, typically hitting on their first-round picks for the most part, not named Jeff Ota, and getting not much else out of the rest of the draft. They got a really solid quality draft class here. A really solid quality draft class that is going to pay even bigger dividends in 2015 and perhaps especially in 2016. You've got 6 future starters for your football team. Ely's going to start next year. Turner will be a full-time starter next year. Boston will be a full-time starter next year. Ben Wakiri, excuse me. I always screw up his name, and I need to learn how to say his name, and a lot of you do too, because this kid played like a stud the last half of the season, in particular the last 4 weeks of the season. He was a beast, and to get him in the 5th round and have him do what he did was outstanding. And then Philly Brown. You know, he's somebody coming in from Ohio State, was under the radar, kind of got buried a little bit because of the depth and overall talent of that great 2014 wide receiver class. He showed that he will be a contributor for this team long-term, along with their stud first-round pick, Kelvin Benjamin. I mean, what an outstanding draft class for the Carolina Panthers, with guys like Cam Newton in place and Luke Kuechly in place. Things look very strong indeed for the Carolina Panthers in the near and distant future. But they have some work to do this offseason. If this Carolina Panthers team wants to run that NFC South like they should do in 2015, if they want to not only do that, but become one of the elite teams in the NFC and be a real threat to go to Super Bowl 50, they've got to fix some of their key areas of need. And those areas of need are on the offensive side of the ball. They cannot go into 2015 with Byron Bell as their starting left tackle. That just cannot happen. That cannot be allowed to happen. Whether it's the 1st round or the 2nd round, whatever the case might be, the Carolina Panthers must find a left tackle. They need to help Cam Newton. They have to be able to protect him. They also need somebody that can contribute a little bit better in the running game than a Byron Bell. The bottom line is they need an upgrade over Byron Bell at left tackle, period. And then, hell, at some point in time, they need to look to the right tackle position too. They need help on the outside on that offensive line. You've got to build around Cam Newton. You've got to help Cam Newton. You've got to be able to protect Cam Newton. And another way to do that is to also give him more weapons on the offensive side of the ball. At some point in time, the Carolina Panthers have to consider spending an early pick on a wide receiver. It paid off very well for you. Big dividends with a Kelvin Benjamin in the 1st round. You've got your number 1 guy. You've got a guy like Philly Brown, a guy that can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a nice type of number 3 option, but probably a little ambitious to expect him to be a number 2 guy at this stage of his career, if ever. You need to find that legit complement, that number 2 guy, that guy that could take some of that pressure and some of that coverage and shift it away from Kelvin Benjamin and open up things outside for Cam Newton in that Carolina Panthers passing game. They must find a more legitimate number 2 wide receiver, than Jericho Coctree. They need a bigger threat. They need a bigger weapon over there. Even if that includes spending a first-round pick on another one. It worked well for you with Kelvin Benjamin. What's so wrong with double dipping and doing it again in 2015? Well, regardless of the case, at some point in time, they have to find a legitimate number 2 opposite Kelvin Benjamin. It will help out in so many different areas. And they must find some help at running back. I don't know that D'Angelo Williams is going to be cut because of the huge cap hit the team would take in 2015 if they did so, but you can't really count on him. And then even with Jonathan Stewart, while he was a big key to the team's success later on in the season, especially that last 4-week stretch, 5-week stretch, and then in the playoffs themselves, how much are you really going to count on Jonathan Stewart? He's a walking injury and waiting to happen, honestly, and he's a guy that's going to be approaching 30 very soon. How much longer, again, can you really count on him? In a draft class that is deep and loaded at the running back position, the Carolina Panthers must position themselves to very quickly be able to move away from D'Angelo Williams and or Jonathan Stewart just like that. They need to get somebody in place long-term to be able to protect Cam Newton by being able to have him hand the ball off 20 times a game to a feature back in the backfield. They must do that. Part of the problem for the Carolina Panthers over the years to me were that they always struggled to establish a real rhythm on offense because they were always trying to mix in D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. It was like too much at one position. They were trying to sit there and validate and justify why they chose both of those guys in the first round in a 2-year stretch. And I always felt it kind of hurt their team offensively. It really helped their ability to establish a rhythm and get comfortable with what they did and establish an identity. Well, now you have a chance to draft a guy that can eventually help you establish that rhythm and establish that identity. This Carolina Panthers team is going to be a serious force in 2015 if things go the way we expect them to go. A great draft class, a great finish to the season, a run into the divisional round of the playoffs. Assuming they get Cam Newton signed long-term, you have one of the brighter young quarterbacks in the National Football League in terms of talent. You have one of the best defensive players in the National Football League in Luke Kuechly. You have one of the best young wide receivers in the National Football League in Kelvin Benjamin. There's a lot of reason for optimism if you're a Carolina Panthers fan. You should be happy. You should be optimistic because looking at that division that they play in, looking at what this team has coming back next year, the fact they'll have more cap room, things are looking up for the Carolina Panthers. 2014 went from being a potentially bad loss season to being ultimately a very big positive.